The marble walls of the federal courtroom echoed with tension as Judge Anthony Tonga brought down his gavel with uncharacteristic force. His face, flushed with fury, locked onto Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who stood composed at the defense table. "Miss Crockett," he declared, his voice clipped and seething, "your remarks about this court's procedures amount to direct contempt. I hereby order the bailiff to take you into custody immediately." A collective gasp swept through the packed courtroom. Shock rippled across the gallery as the bailiff advanced toward the Congresswoman, handcuffs at the ready. Phones shot into the air as spectators scrambled to record what seemed unthinkable: a federal judge attempting to jail a sitting member of Congress during a pivotal voting rights hearing. But what unfolded in the next 5 minutes would leave everyone speechless. In a display of calm defiance, Congresswoman Crockett reached into her case file and produced irrefutable evidence that not only justified her criticism but revealed the judge's extraordinary overstep. The room shifted instantly from outrage to disbelief. The judge's expression darkened, then drained to pale recognition. The footage captured in that moment would go viral, sparking national outrage and casting a harsh spotlight on the integrity of the federal judiciary. Before we delve further into the extraordinary events of that day, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories of individuals standing up to power in the pursuit of justice. Now, let's return to that fateful morning in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas. The atmosphere was already thick with anticipation. The courtroom had become a stage for one of the most high-stakes voting rights cases in recent memory: Coalition for Voter Access versus State of Texas, Case No. 23, CV 4721. Representing the state was Deputy Attorney General Maxwell Reed, a Harvard-trained legal veteran with 2 decades of experience defending contentious state policies. Flanked by a polished legal team, Reed exuded the confidence of someone backed by the full force of state authority. Opposite them sat the plaintiffs, a coalition of civil rights organizations challenging Texas's controversial new voting law, Senate Bill 4791. Leading their case was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett herself, taking a temporary leave from Congress to offer her legal expertise pro bono. Prior to her election, Crockett had carved out a reputation as a formidable civil rights litigator, winning multiple landmark cases. Presiding over the courtroom was Judge Anthony Chen, a federal jurist with 15 years on the bench. Known for his rigid courtroom discipline and deferential stance toward state legislatures, Chen had increasingly drawn criticism for his impatience with voting rights advocates. His conservative rulings had shaped the legal battleground over election laws in Texas. And on that tense morning, all those threads, law, power, justice, and resistance, collided in a moment that would reverberate far beyond the courtroom walls. The courtroom's tension wasn't just the result of a high-stakes case. It had been simmering from the day before, when sharp exchanges had ignited a deeper conflict. At the heart of it was Judge Anthony Taringa's controversial decision to limit witness testimony from the plaintiffs. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had publicly called those restrictions procedurally abnormal and potentially prejudicial, remarks made to reporters during a lunch recess. By the next morning, it was clear those words had reached the bench. As court resumed, Judge Taringa's voice cut through the silence with a tone seasoned attorneys instantly recognized as foreboding. "Before we proceed with witness testimony," he said, eyes fixed on the plaintiff's table, "I want to address comments made to the press regarding this court's procedural decisions." Congresswoman Crockett rose to her feet, composed and steady. At 42, she exuded the confidence of someone well-versed in confrontation. "Your Honor, if you're referring to my remarks, I stand by my professional assessment of the restrictions imposed yesterday." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Miss Crockett, you implied this court demonstrated bias. That's a serious charge, one that threatens the integrity of these proceedings." Crockett didn't flinch. "With respect, Your Honor, I observed that limiting testimony from directly affected voters, while permitting extended time for state officials to speculate on hypotheticals, creates an appearance of procedural imbalance. That's not an accusation. It's a factual analysis of the consequences of the court's rulings." Deputy Attorney General Maxwell Reed, sensing an opportunity, quickly interjected. "Your Honor, perhaps we should move forward with today's witnesses and leave media commentary outside the courtroom." But Judge Taringa wasn't finished. "Miss Crockett, you are not merely an attorney in this courtroom. You are a sitting member of Congress. Your words carry consequences that extend well beyond these proceedings." All the more reason I must speak truthfully and precisely about matters that impact democratic access, Crockett responded. My obligations, both to this court and to the public, require that I address those impacts clearly and candidly. A low murmur spread through the gallery. Journalists leaned forward, pin-scratching as they documented what was quickly becoming a confrontation between institutional power and political accountability. On one side, a judge accustomed to control within his courtroom. On the other, a congresswoman known for her fearless defense of civil rights. Judge Tarina leaned forward. Let me be absolutely clear. This court will not be swayed by political pressure or media narratives. The rules of evidence and procedure apply equally, regardless of title or public profile. I couldn't agree more, Your Honor, Crockett said, lifting a folder from her table. Which is why I've prepared a motion detailing the disparate application of those very rules during yesterday's proceedings. She placed the motion before her. The court allowed state witnesses to offer lengthy, unsupported theories of voter fraud, while severely limiting testimony from actual voters who presented documented evidence of disenfranchisement. Judge Taringa's expression darkened. Ms. Crockett, filing a motion does not give you license to deliver a lecture on courtroom procedure. I'm not lecturing, Crockett replied coolly. I'm advocating for my clients, as is my ethical duty. And this motion outlines specific examples where this court's limitations appear to contradict binding Fifth Circuit precedent. The judge's jaw tightened. The Fifth Circuit has consistently granted district judges wide discretion in evidentiary matters. And that discretion, Crockett replied firmly, must still be exercised within the bounds of fairness and precedent. That's not politics, it's law. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood her ground. With respect, Your Honor, she said, opening a casebook, I believe the court exceeded its discretion yesterday in ways that contradict established precedent. She referenced Garza versus Texas Department of Elections, a Fifth Circuit case. But before she could elaborate, Judge Tarina cut her off sharply. That's enough, he snapped, his voice rising. Miss Crockett, your continued challenges to this court's authority are veering dangerously close to contempt. Despite the judge's escalating tone, Crockett remained steady. Citing relevant precedent is not contempt, Your Honor. It's called zealous advocacy, which is not only protected but required under the Texas Bar's ethical standards. The tension in the courtroom was now palpable. Most attorneys would have backed down, but not Crockett. Unshaken, she continued her argument with methodical precision. Furthermore, she added, the Supreme Court's decision in DNC v. Wisconsin State Legislature makes clear that courts must give special weight to first-hand accounts of voter disenfranchisement, the very testimony this court limited yesterday. That final comment appeared to push Judge Tarina over the edge. His face flushed with anger. Miss Crockett, I find your repeated attempts to undermine this court's authority, in the press and now in open court, to be direct contempt. Bailiff, take her into custody until she's prepared to show appropriate respect for these proceedings. A wave of shock rippled through the courtroom as the bailiff stepped forward, handcuffs in hand. Crockett didn't move. Her expression was unreadable, her composure unshaken. Members of her legal team leapt to their feet. Your Honor, said her lead co-counsel, Jennifer Washington, we formally object to this contempt order and request an immediate stay pending emergency appeal to the Fifth Circuit. She was already reaching for her phone. We also remind the court that Congresswoman Crockett, as a sitting member of Congress, is afforded certain legal immunities. Even Deputy Attorney General Maxwell Reed, representing the state, looked uneasy. Your Honor, while the state takes no position on this issue, perhaps a short recess would be appropriate before taking such an extraordinary step. Judge Taringa's tone turned cold. The immunity referenced applies to legislative speech on the House floor, not courtroom conduct. The contempt order stands. Crockett still didn't flinch. As the bailiff approached her, she calmly raised a hand. One moment, please, she said with quiet authority, then turned to address the bench once more. Your Honor, before you take the unprecedented step of jailing a sitting member of Congress for citing case law, I believe judicial ethics require a disclosure. Tarina narrowed his eyes. You are in no position to lecture this court on ethics. I'm not lecturing, Crockett replied evenly. I'm presenting information relevant to these proceedings. She opened a folder. Yesterday, while reviewing case documentation, my team uncovered material that directly concerns this court's impartiality. This is not the time for new evidentiary matters, Tarina snapped. The bailiff will proceed. But Crockett held firm. Canon 3 of the Code of Conduct for U.S. Judges requires disclosure of any personal relationships that might call judicial neutrality into question. We've discovered communications that suggest undisclosed ties between Your Honor and parties with financial stakes in this case. A stunned silence settled over the room. Judge Taringa's expression shifted, from indignation to confusion, then to something less certain. What exactly are you suggesting, Congresswoman? I'm not suggesting anything, Crockett replied. I'm presenting facts. She lifted a document from the folder. This is an email exchange between Your Honor and Richard Fulton, CEO of Secure Vote Systems. The company awarded a $43 million contract to implement the voting restrictions challenged in this case. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Journalists leaned forward, pens flying across notebooks. Those communications are privileged and irrelevant, the judge replied, though the strength had drained from his voice. Ordinarily, perhaps, Crockett acknowledged. But they were sent through your official court email address, making them subject to FOIA. More importantly, they show you and Mr. Fulton discussing this legislation months before it was introduced, along with his thanks for your guidance in drafting regulations he believed would survive judicial scrutiny. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. All eyes turned to Judge Taringa, whose silence spoke louder than any gavel ever could. Judge Taringa slammed his gavel multiple times, the sharp sound echoing through the tense courtroom. This is outrageous, he barked, visibly rattled. Those emails are being taken completely out of context. But Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett remained unshaken. The context is quite clear, Your Honor, she said calmly. The emails also show that you attended 3 private dinners with Mr. Fulton during the period when this legislation was being drafted. None of those meetings were disclosed to the parties in this case, despite Secure Vote's direct financial interest in the outcome. Deputy Attorney General Maxwell Reed rose from his seat, his discomfort evident. Your Honor, the state was unaware of these alleged communications. If they exist as described, they would absolutely raise legitimate concerns regarding potential recusal. The color drained from Judge Taringa's face. These accusations are procedurally improper and potentially defamatory, Congresswoman. They are neither improper nor defamatory if they're true, Crockett replied evenly. And they are. She raised a document. This is a certification from the court's own IT administrator, confirming the authenticity of the email exchanges, retrieved legally through a FOIA request. The bailiff, who had been lingering beside Crockett, holding handcuffs just moments earlier, now hesitated and glanced toward the judge, unsure how to proceed. Crockett pressed forward. Your Honor, I'm submitting a formal motion for your immediate recusal based on these undisclosed ex parte communications and clear conflicts of interest. I've also prepared an emergency petition to the Fifth Circuit should you decline to recuse. She paused deliberately before adding, furthermore, I have already shared copies of the relevant communications with the Judicial Conduct Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, on which I currently serve. The judge's expression flickered through a range of emotions, first anger, then alarm, and finally the quiet realization of his precarious position. The courtroom was silent. Every person present, reporter, attorney, plaintiff, and spectator, watched the drama unfold in stunned stillness. Crockett's voice cut through again, measured and firm. Given the nature of these undisclosed interactions, any contempt order issued against counsel for raising questions about judicial impartiality could appear retaliatory rather than remedial. The Fifth Circuit has issued specific guidance warning against such misuse of contempt authority. She closed her folder with deliberate calm. In light of these facts, I respectfully request that both the contempt proceedings and today's scheduled hearings be suspended until the recusal issue can be fully reviewed in accordance with judicial ethics standards. The judge sat frozen behind the bench, visibly struggling to reassert control over a courtroom that no longer deferred unquestioningly to his authority. The bailiff now stood to the side, handcuffs lowered, uncertain of his next move. After what felt like a long pause, Judge Taringa finally cleared his throat. In view of these unexpected disclosures, this court will take a 30-minute recess to review the materials presented by counsel. His voice, once firm and commanding, had been replaced by a hollow, formal tone. The bailiff will stand down. We are in recess. With that, Judge Taringa rose and exited the courtroom, his steps brisk but unsteady. As the doors closed behind him, the gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters dashed for the exits to break the story, while legal observers exchanged wide-eyed commentary on the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. At the plaintiff's table, Congresswoman Crockett remained calm, quietly conferring with her team. The handcuffs that had nearly been locked on her wrists now seemed trivial compared to the revelations she had placed on the record, revelations that could reverberate far beyond the courtroom. When Judge Tarina returned after the recess, he was a changed man. The commanding air that had filled the courtroom earlier was gone. He moved slowly, cautiously, like someone navigating a minefield. His expression was tight, his tone measured. As he adjusted his robe and looked out over the still-packed gallery, it was clear. The balance of power in the room had shifted, and everyone knew it. The courtroom was silent as Judge Tarina cleared his throat, his tone markedly subdued from earlier. Before addressing the issues raised by Congresswoman Crockett, I need to clarify certain facts for the record, he began, his voice steady but cautious. The communications in question do exist, but they must be understood in the proper context. He paused, clearly weighing his next words. While I did exchange emails with Mr. Fulton and attended events where he was present, those interactions occurred primarily in the context of a judicial conference on election law, where we were both invited speakers. Congresswoman Crockett remained silent, her expression unreadable. However, the judge continued, upon review, I must acknowledge that certain aspects of these communications could create the appearance of impropriety, even if that was never the intent. Judicial ethics demand not just actual impartiality, but the appearance of impartiality as well. A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Legal observers recognized the subtle shift. This was the language of damage control. In accordance with 28 U.S.C. sections 455 and 144, Tarina said, I am recusing myself from all further proceedings in this case, effective immediately. The courtroom erupted into shocked whispers. Reporters hurriedly updated their stories. Furthermore, the judge added, raising his voice slightly, the contempt order against Congresswoman Crockett is hereby vacated. The court affirms that zealous advocacy, including challenging judicial decisions using relevant precedent, is not only permitted but foundational to our adversarial system. Crockett gave a brief nod, her demeanor composed. Her legal team exchanged silent looks of vindication. This case will be reassigned randomly to another judge in this district, as per standard protocol, Tarina continued. All previous rulings are subject to review by the newly assigned judge. Turning to face Crockett directly, his tone softened. Congresswoman, while the court maintains that some of your public statements were unnecessarily provocative, your procedural concerns, particularly regarding witness limitations, were not without merit. The incoming judge will re-examine those matters with fresh eyes. This concession stirred another wave of murmurs from the audience. Deputy AG Reed looked visibly unsettled, realizing the procedural advantage his team had enjoyed might now be reversed. Finally, Judge Tarina addressed the courtroom with a more reflective tone. Our judiciary only functions when all participants respect ethical boundaries. Judges must remain above suspicion of bias, and attorneys must be free to challenge rulings without fear of retribution. When either side missteps, our legal system provides remedies. Today's proceedings, while highly charged, are a testament to the endurance of those checks and balances. With that, he made his final declaration. This court stands in recess, pending reassignment. We are adjourned. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of exiting through the door behind the bench, Judge Tarina stepped down and walked toward the plaintiff's table. The gallery held its breath as he extended a hand to Congresswoman Crockett. Congresswoman, he said quietly, whatever our legal disagreements, your commitment to the rule of law is clear. I regret that our proceedings reached such a contentious point. Crockett accepted the gesture without hesitation. Thank you, Your Honor. The integrity of our judicial system matters to all of us, even when we're on opposing sides of difficult issues. The handshake lasted only seconds, but its symbolism was profound, a judge acknowledging his overreach, and an attorney responding with professionalism, not triumph. As Tarina exited the courtroom for the last time in this case, the room burst into quiet chaos, reporters racing to file updates, legal analysts debating the implications, and cameras flashing from every corner. At the center of it all stood Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, no longer a target of contempt, but the catalyst for a reset in a critical voting rights case. Her legal team congratulated her, but she remained focused. This isn't about me or Judge Tarina, she told them. It's about ensuring that every eligible voter can access the ballot box without unnecessary obstacles. One barrier has been removed today, but the real fight continues. Outside, the courthouse steps were packed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Crockett emerged, flanked by her legal team and members of the Voting Rights Coalition. Microphones lined the walkway, and cameras zoomed in from all angles. Still composed, she stepped to the podium. Today's events were not about personal conflict, she said clearly. They were about something far greater, the integrity of our courts and the fundamental right of every American to vote. She sidestepped the personal drama and refocused on the broader stakes. What happened in that courtroom reminds us that our legal system, while imperfect, still has the capacity for self-correction. Judges must guard against undue influence. Lawyers must advocate without fear. And when either fails, the system must respond. A reporter shouted, "Congresswoman, what were you thinking when the judge ordered you into custody?" Crockett smiled faintly. "I wasn't worried about myself. I was thinking of my clients, the voters who stand to lose their rights if no one speaks up." And with that, she stepped away from the microphones, not as the center of a courtroom drama, but as a public servant refusing to let the story end at a symbolic victory. "Every moment we spend focused on courtroom drama," Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett said, "is a moment we're not focused on the real issue, ensuring every eligible voter can cast their ballot without unnecessary obstacles." With that single line, she shifted the national conversation from controversy to principle, a skill she had mastered throughout her legal and political career. Back inside the courthouse, the repercussions of the morning's dramatic events were already reverberating through the legal community. Staff whispered about Judge Turinga's sudden recusal. Federal bar veterans speculated about what would happen next, not just with the case, but with the judge himself. By afternoon, legal blogs and major news outlets had dissected every moment of the confrontation. Constitutional scholars debated the limits of judicial contempt powers. Ethics experts analyzed the implications of the undisclosed communications Congresswoman Crockett had exposed. By evening, the story had gone national. Cable news segments aired with headlines like "From Handcuffs to Vindication," "A Congresswoman's Stand in Judicial Ethics in the Hot Seat," "The Crockett-Turinga Clash." Social media exploded with polarized reactions. Hashtags such as #CrocketCourage, #Judicial Accountability, #RespectTheBench, and #JudgeTargeted trended simultaneously, evidence of a divided yet deeply engaged public. 3 days later, the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts confirmed that Judge Turinga had requested a temporary leave of absence, pending review by the Judicial Conduct Committee. The statement emphasized that the move was voluntary and not an admission of misconduct. The case was reassigned to Judge Elaine Rodriguez, a widely respected jurist known for her meticulous commitment to procedural fairness. In her first hearing, she granted the plaintiff's motion to recall voter witnesses previously barred from testifying, signaling a complete procedural reset. A week after the courtroom clash, Congresswoman Crockett was invited to speak at Harvard Law School's annual conference on judicial ethics. Her keynote address, "Advocacy and Accountability, Maintaining the Balance of Justice," drew from her own experience without directly referencing Judge Turinga. "Our legal system functions best when power is restrained by ethical boundaries," she told a packed room of judges, attorneys, and scholars. Judges hold enormous authority in their courtrooms, as they should. But that authority must be guided by transparency, impartiality, and openness to legitimate advocacy. Likewise, attorneys have not just the right but the duty to challenge decisions that may affect their clients' constitutional rights, grounded in law, argued with fact, and presented with respect for the institution, even if not always for the individual behind the bench. The speech was widely praised for its poise and principle, quickly becoming required reading in judicial ethics courses across the country. Back in Texas, under Judge Rodriguez's direction, the voting rights case moved forward. The voter testimony previously excluded was now fully heard, giving voice to those directly affected by the new restrictions. Both sides presented expert witnesses, subjected to rigorous cross-examination, establishing a far more complete and balanced factual record. 2 months after Judge Turinga's recusal, the Judicial Conduct Committee released its findings. While the panel acknowledged that his communications with SecureVote's CEO should have been disclosed, they found no definitive evidence of actual bias in his rulings. As a result, the committee recommended additional ethics training rather than formal sanctions, citing Turinga's long service and previously unblemished record. In a public statement, Judge Turinga accepted the committee's findings and admitted to an error in judgment. "Even the appearance of impropriety undermines public trust in our courts," he wrote. "After 30 years on the bench, I failed to uphold the transparency our system demands. I apologize to the parties involved and to all who rely on the integrity of our judiciary. He added that upon returning from leave, he would no longer preside over cases involving election law or voting rights to avoid any further questions of impartiality. 3 months after the initial confrontation, Judge Rodriguez issued her ruling. In a carefully crafted 87-page opinion, she struck down key portions of the challenged law while upholding others. Though the decision didn't please all sides, it was widely respected for its depth and fairness. The ruling cited the first-hand accounts of affected voters, testimony that had originally been excluded, as essential to evaluating the real-world impact of the law. When asked for her reaction, Crockett offered a response consistent with the values she had upheld from the start. This decision shows what's possible when courts fully engage with the facts and the law, she said. We didn't win every point, but we were heard. And in this system, a fair hearing is what every advocate truly asks for. The case was eventually appealed to the Fifth Circuit, where a panel of judges praised Judge Rodriguez's ruling for its clarity and balance. A year later, the Harvard Law Review published an in-depth analysis titled When Advocacy Meets Authority: Lessons from Coalition for Voter Access versus Texas. The article explored how the case revealed the tension and mutual dependence between judicial authority and legal advocacy. The final paragraph captured the heart of what the case had come to represent. What began as a clash of personalities became a reaffirmation of a deeper truth. No one in the courtroom, neither judge nor advocate, is above accountability. Judge Turinga's attempt to silence Congresswoman Crockett did not fail because of political pressure or media outrage, but because the legal system itself contains mechanisms to check power when misused. Crockett's victory was not just personal. It was a triumph of principle, that law and fact must prevail over rank and position. For lawyers, judges, and students across the country, the case became a landmark example of ethical boundaries, procedural fairness, and the courage required to defend them. As for Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, she returned to her work in Congress with renewed respect from both sides of the aisle. When asked in a later interview whether she had felt fear when the judge ordered her arrest, she offered a quiet but powerful answer. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about jail cells or handcuffs. I was thinking about my clients, the Constitution, and the integrity of a system I've sworn to uphold. When you know you're standing on solid legal ground, fear gives way to something stronger, the certainty that the truth, when properly presented, will prevail. If you found this story of courage, ethics, and accountability inspiring, please like and subscribe for more stories of Americans standing up for justice and democratic principles. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in that courtroom? We'll see you next week with another powerful true story where justice prevails against the odds.